I discovered the truth about our building's elevator fund on a Tuesday morning in September, standing in the stairwell between the 7th and 8th floors with my knees screaming and my grocery bags cutting circulation to my fingers. The elevator had been broken for 6 weeks at that point. 6 weeks of hauling myself up 12 flights of stairs to my apartment in the Grandview Towers, a luxury high-rise in downtown Charlotte, North Carolina. 6 weeks of watching my elderly neighbors struggle with their walkers, of seeing young mothers carry strollers and toddlers up endless concrete steps, of listening to everyone's complaints echo through the building's emergency stairwell that smelled like industrial cleaner and desperation. I had moved into Grandview Towers 3 years ago, attracted by the building's prime location, the promised amenities, and what I thought was a reasonable HOA fee of $450 per month. The building had been constructed in 1998, 28 floors of glass and steel overlooking the Charlotte skyline, with 2 elevators that had always been reliable until they suddenly were not. The first elevator had gone out in late July. A sign appeared on the doors, temporarily out of service for repairs. Nobody thought much of it initially. Elevators break down. It happens. We still had the second elevator, and management assured us the first would be fixed within 2 weeks. Then the second elevator died 3 weeks later, and suddenly the entire building was trapped in a vertical nightmare. I set my grocery bags down on the 8th floor landing, flexing my aching fingers. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Marcus, my neighbor on the 12th floor who worked from home as a software developer. "Dude, you need to see this. Come to my place when you get up here," I texted back. "Can it wait? Dying here? No, trust me, this is about the elevators." That got my attention. I picked up my bags and pushed through the remaining 4 floors, my thighs burning with each step. By the time I reached my floor, I was sweating through my shirt despite the air conditioning in the stairwell. I dropped my groceries inside my apartment and walked down the hall to Marcus's unit. He answered on the first knock, his face flushed with anger. "You are not going to believe this," he said, pulling me inside. His laptop was open on the dining table, surrounded by scattered papers and empty coffee mugs. Marcus was 32 like me, with dark hair that he constantly ran his hands through when he was agitated. Right now, it was standing up in every direction. "I have been digging through the HOA financial records," he said, "the ones they are legally required to make available to residents. Took me 3 weeks to get them, and they tried every excuse in the book to avoid handing them over." "And," I asked, pulling out a chair, "and our HOA president, Sharon Whitmore, along with the rest of the board, has been stealing from us." He turned the laptop toward me. "Look at this." The screen showed a spreadsheet with highlighted entries. I leaned closer, scanning the numbers. "These are the elevator maintenance and repair funds," Marcus explained, pointing at a column. "Every resident pays into this. It is a dedicated fund separate from the general HOA fees. We have been paying an extra $75 a month specifically for elevator maintenance and eventual replacement." I did the math quickly in my head. There are 168 units in this building. Exactly. That is $12,600 per month going into the elevator fund, and this building is almost 30 years old. That fund should have hundreds of thousands of dollars in it by now. "How much is in it?" I asked, though I was starting to get a sick feeling in my stomach. $52,000, that is it. And you want to know why? Marcus clicked to another document. "Because Sharon and the board approved a massive transfer of funds 6 months ago. $280,000 moved from the elevator maintenance fund to something called the Executive Residential Improvement Project." I stared at the screen. "What the hell is that?" "That is what I wanted to know." Marcus pulled up another set of documents. So I cross-referenced it with the building's contractor records, which are also supposed to be public. Guess what the Executive Residential Improvement Project turned out to be? Tell me. "A complete luxury renovation of the Penthouse suite." Marcus's voice was tight with fury. "Sharon Whitmore lives in the Penthouse. She has been using our elevator money to renovate her own apartment. My jaw dropped. That cannot be legal. It is definitely not legal. It is called misappropriation of funds, and depending on how the prosecutor wants to charge it, it could be embezzlement or even fraud. Marcus pulled up photos on his phone. And check this out. I have a friend who does HVAC work in the building. He sent me these. The photos showed the penthouse mid-renovation. Marble countertops, custom cabinetry, a huge soaking tub that looked like it cost more than my car, floor-to-ceiling windows with electric tinting, and hardwood floors that gleamed even in the construction photos. This is insane, I breathed. It gets worse, Marcus said. The reason both elevators are broken is because the board kept deferring maintenance to fund Sharon's renovation. The elevators are original to the building. They were supposed to be completely refurbished 3 years ago. The fund had enough money for it then. But Sharon kept pushing it off, kept moving money around, and now both elevators have failed catastrophically. The repair estimate I managed to get my hands on says it will cost $400,000 to fix them both properly. And we only have $52,000 in the fund. Right. Which means the board is going to have to either levy a special assessment on all of us, or take out a loan that will increase our monthly HOA fees. Marcus sat back in his chair. Meanwhile, Sharon is living in a penthouse that looks like it belongs in a magazine, paid for with money that was supposed to keep the building functional. I felt anger rising in my chest, hot and sharp. We need to do something about this. I already started, Marcus said. I have been reaching out to other residents, showing them the documents. We need to organize. The next HOA board meeting is in 2 days, Thursday night. I think we should pack that meeting and confront Sharon directly. I am in, I said immediately. Who else have you talked to? About 15 people so far. Everyone is furious. Mrs. Chen on the 14th floor, she is 83 years old. She has not left the building in 6 weeks because she cannot do the stairs. Do you know what that is doing to her? She has doctor appointments she is missing. Her daughter has been trying to carry groceries up to her, but she has got a bad back herself. I thought about Mrs. Chen, a sweet woman who always smiled and asked about my day when we passed in the hallway. The image of her trapped in her apartment made my hands curl into fists. What about the other board members? I asked. Is Sharon the only one involved? No, there are 5 board members total. Sharon is the president. Then there is Richard Kowalski, the vice president. He is some finance guy, definitely knew exactly what was happening with the money. Linda Patterson is the treasurer, so she literally handles the accounts. And then there are 2 other board members, Craig Foster and Brenda Mitchell. They all voted to approve the fund transfer. So they are all guilty. Absolutely. But Sharon is the ringleader. This was her project, her penthouse. Marcus closed his laptop. Listen, I have been documenting everything. I have copies of all the financial records, the contractor invoices, everything. I also reached out to a lawyer friend who specializes in HOA disputes. She says we have a solid case both for civil action and potentially criminal charges. Criminal charges, I repeated. They could go to jail for this. If the district attorney decides to prosecute, yeah, this is not just a civil matter. They stole money that was held in trust for a specific purpose. That is a crime. Marcus stood up and walked to his window, looking out over Charlotte's downtown skyline. But we need to be smart about this. If we go in there Thursday night and just start yelling, Sharon will shut us down. She runs those meetings like a dictator. I had been to a few HOA meetings over the years. Marcus was right. Sharon Whitmore was 52 years old, with blonde hair that she kept in a perfect bob, designer clothes that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and an attitude that suggested she thought she was doing everyone a favor by deigning to manage the building. She ran the meetings with an iron fist, cutting people off, dismissing concerns, and generally acting like she owned the place, which I supposed she thought she did. What is your plan? I asked. I think we need to get as many residents as possible to show up. We request time on the agenda to discuss the elevator situation. We present the financial documents calmly and professionally. We demand answers, and then we call for a vote to remove the entire board and hold a special election. Can we do that? According to the HOA bylaws, yes. If 20% of residents sign a petition calling for a special election, the board has to hold one within 30 days. Marcus grabbed a notebook from the table. I have been drafting the petition. We just need signatures. I will help you get them, I said. I will go door to door if I have to. Good. Because we need 28 residents minimum, and I want to get way more than that to show we have overwhelming support. Marcus handed me a printed copy of the petition. Also, start spreading the word about Thursday's meeting. 7 p.m. in the community room. We need that room packed. I took the petition and folded it carefully. This is really happening. This is really happening, Marcus confirmed. Sharon Whitmore is about to find out that she cannot just steal from people and get away with it. The next 2 days were a blur of activity. I spent every spare moment knocking on doors, showing residents the financial documents Marcus had compiled and explaining what had happened. The reaction was universal, shock followed by rage. Mrs. Chen cried when I showed her the numbers. I have been paying into that elevator fund for 15 years, she said, her voice shaking. And they just took it. For her fancy bathtub, Mr. Rodriguez on the 9th floor, a retired contractor, studied the renovation photos with a professional eye. This work cost way more than $280,000, he said. I would estimate closer to $400,000 for this level of finish. Where did the rest of the money come from? That was a good question. Marcus and I dug deeper and found that Sharon had also approved several other questionable transfers from the building's general maintenance fund and the reserve fund. The total misappropriation was probably closer to $500,000. By Thursday afternoon, we had 63 signatures on the petition, nearly 4 times what we needed. More importantly, we had commitments from over 50 residents to attend the meeting that night. The community room in the Grandview Towers was designed to hold about 40 people comfortably. By 6:45, there were already 60 residents crammed into the space, with more arriving every minute. People lined the walls, sat on the floor, and crowded in the doorway. Sharon Whitmore arrived at exactly 7 p.m., walking in with the 4 other board members. She was wearing a cream-colored pantsuit and had a leather binder tucked under her arm. Her expression was pleasant, almost bored, like this was just another routine meeting. That expression changed when she saw the crowd. "What is going on here?" she asked, her voice sharp. "HOA meeting," Marcus called out from the front row. "We are all residents. We are allowed to attend." Sharon's eyes narrowed as she scanned the room. I could see her calculating, trying to figure out what this was about. She moved to the front table where the board members sat, whispering something to Richard Kowalski. He looked nervous, his eyes darting around the room. Sharon called the meeting to order, going through the standard opening procedures. She tried to move through the agenda quickly, clearly hoping to get this over with before anyone could cause trouble. Marcus raised his hand during the open comments period. "Yes," Sharon said, her tone suggesting she already regretted acknowledging him. Marcus stood up, holding a folder of documents. "I would like to discuss the status of the elevator repairs and the building's financial management." "The elevators are being addressed," Sharon said dismissively. "We have contractors providing estimates." "I am sure you do," Marcus said calmly. "But I would like to understand why the elevator maintenance fund, which should have hundreds of thousands of dollars in it, currently only has $52,000. The room went completely silent. Sharon's face went pale, then flushed red. "I do not know where you are getting your information, but the building's finances are in perfect order," she said, her voice tight. "Really?" Marcus pulled out a printed spreadsheet. "Because according to the financial records that I obtained through a formal request, which you are legally required to provide, there was a transfer of $280,000 from the elevator fund to something called the Executive Residential Improvement Project 6 months ago. Would you like to explain what that project was? Sharon's mouth opened and closed. Richard Kowalski leaned over and whispered something to her. She shook her head sharply. That was an approved expenditure for building improvements, Sharon finally said. Building improvements, I called out from my seat. Or penthouse improvements? Sharon's eyes snapped to me. Excuse me, I stood up, my heart pounding. The Executive Residential Improvement Project was a renovation of your penthouse apartment. We have the contractor invoices, the photos, everything. You used money that was supposed to maintain the elevators to renovate your personal residence. The room exploded. Residents started shouting questions, their voices overlapping in a wave of anger. Sharon tried to bang a gavel to restore order, but nobody was listening. This is out of order, she yelled. You are all out of order. No, you are out of line, Mrs. Chen shouted from her wheelchair near the front. Her daughter had managed to get her down the stairs for this meeting, a 4-hour ordeal. I have been trapped in my apartment for 6 weeks because you stole from us. I did not steal anything. Sharon's composure was cracking. That money was used for legitimate building improvements. Your apartment is not a building improvement, Marcus shot back. It is your private property, and using communal funds for your personal benefit is called embezzlement. Linda Patterson, the treasurer, suddenly stood up. She was a thin woman in her 40s who had always seemed nervous at meetings. Now she looked terrified. I did not want to do it, she blurted out. Sharon said it was fine, that we could move the money around, that nobody would notice. Shut up, Linda, Richard Kowalski hissed. No. Linda's voice rose. I am not going to jail for this. I told you it was illegal, Sharon. I told you we could not just take money from the elevator fund. Sharon's face was now bright red. You are all overreacting. This is a simple accounting matter that can be explained. Then explain it, I said. Explain why you thought it was okay to renovate your penthouse with our money while the elevators failed and residents were trapped. The elevators failed due to age and normal wear and tear, Sharon said, trying to regain control of her voice. The renovation of the penthouse was necessary to maintain property values. As the showcase unit of the building, it needed to meet certain standards. Showcase unit? Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. It is your home. And you do not get to decide unilaterally to spend $250,000 of our money on it. Mr. Rodriguez stood up. I am a contractor, been one for 40 years. I looked at the invoices you distributed, Marcus. That renovation included custom Italian marble, a designer bathtub that costs $30,000 retail, smart home technology, custom built-ins, and finishes that are way beyond what would be needed to maintain property values. This was a luxury renovation, pure and simple. And while you were installing your fancy bathtub, a woman in the back shouted, my husband had a heart attack on the stairs. The ambulance had to carry him down 12 flights because the elevators were broken. He could have died. I remembered that incident. It had happened 3 weeks ago. The paramedics had been furious, saying the delay caused by the stairs could have been fatal. Sharon was backed into a corner now, and she knew it. Her expression shifted from defensive to aggressive. Fine, she snapped. You want to play this game? The board approved that transfer unanimously. It was legal according to the bylaws. If you do not like how we are managing the building, you can vote us out at the next election. The next election is not for another year, Marcus said. But fortunately, we do not have to wait that long. We have a petition here signed by 63 residents calling for a special election to remove the current board. That is well over the 20% threshold required by the bylaws. He held up the thick stack of petition pages. Sharon stared at it like it was a snake. You cannot do that, she said, but her voice had lost its certainty. We absolutely can, Marcus said. And we are also filing a formal complaint with the North Carolina Secretary of State's office regarding misappropriation of HOA funds. We have additionally compiled all of this evidence and will be presenting it to the district attorney's office for review of potential criminal charges. Criminal charges. Brenda Mitchell, one of the other board members, stood up abruptly. I did not know this was illegal. Sharon said it was fine. I just voted yes because I trusted her. Craig Foster was nodding frantically. Same here, I am not a financial person. Sharon and Richard handled all of that. I just thought we were approving building improvements. Sharon turned on them. Sit down and shut up, both of you. But it was too late. The board was fracturing and everyone could see it. Richard Kowalski stood up slowly. He was a tall man in an expensive suit, the kind of person who always looked like he was calculating the angles. I think we should table this discussion and consult with the building's attorney, he said smoothly. No, I said firmly. We are done with delays and excuses. We want answers now and we want the board to resign immediately. We are not resigning, Sharon said, but she sounded uncertain now. Then we will remove you, Marcus said. According to the bylaws, when a valid petition for a special election is submitted, the current board must schedule that election within 30 days. Are you going to comply with the bylaws, or do we need to pursue legal action to force compliance? Sharon looked at Richard, who gave a tiny shake of his head, but Linda was already gathering her things. I resign, Linda announced. Effective immediately. I am not dealing with this anymore, Linda. Sharon's voice was sharp. Sit down. No, I quit. Find someone else to be your scapegoat. Linda walked out of the room, and I could hear her footsteps echoing as she headed for the stairwell. The meeting descended into chaos after that. Brenda and Craig both announced they were resigning too, leaving just Sharon and Richard at the table. Residents were shouting questions, demands, and accusations. Several people were recording everything on their phones. Finally, Sharon stood up and gathered her things. This meeting is adjourned, she announced, her voice cold. We are not finished, Marcus said. Yes, we are. Sharon walked toward the door, Richard following close behind. You want to call a special election? Fine. You want to file complaints? Go ahead. But until you actually remove me, I am still the president of this board, and I am telling you this meeting is over. She pushed through the crowd and left. Richard hurried after her, avoiding eye contact with everyone. The room was buzzing with conversation after they left. Marcus climbed onto a chair to address everyone. Okay, everyone, listen up, he shouted over the noise. The room gradually quieted. We just took the first step, but we need to stay organized. I need volunteers to help coordinate the special election, to continue gathering evidence, and to reach out to residents who could not make it tonight. We also need to formally file complaints with the state and potentially with law enforcement. Hands shot up around the room. I volunteered immediately, along with about 20 other people. We formed a steering committee right there, electing Marcus as the temporary chairman since he had done most of the groundwork. Mrs. Chen wheeled herself closer to the front. What about the elevators? She asked. Even if we remove Sharon, we still do not have money to fix them. That was the million-dollar question, literally. Marcus nodded grimly. We are going to have to look at all our options. There might be insurance claims we can file, especially if we can prove the board's negligence directly caused the failures. We will also look into whether Sharon and the other board members can be held personally liable for the costs. If they misappropriated the funds, they should be responsible for paying them back. Can we sue them? Someone asked. Absolutely, Marcus said. We can file a civil lawsuit against the board members personally, seeking to recover the misappropriated funds plus damages. That is separate from any criminal charges they might face. Over the next few days, our makeshift residence committee worked around the clock. Marcus, as it turned out, was not just a software developer. He had a business degree and had served on nonprofit boards before. He knew how to organize people and build a case. We compiled a comprehensive report documenting every questionable financial transaction the board had made over the past 3 years. It turned out the penthouse renovation was just the tip of the iceberg. Sharon had also approved generous payments to her nephew's landscaping company for minimal work, had rented luxury vehicles for building business that included weekend trips to the mountains, and had approved expensive dinners at high-end restaurants charged as board meetings. All told, we estimated that Sharon and her board had misappropriated or wasted approximately $600,000 of HOA funds. I personally delivered the complaint to the North Carolina Secretary of State's office. The woman who received it, a middle-aged civil servant with sharp eyes, flipped through the documents with growing interest. "This is pretty egregious," she said. "We will definitely be opening an investigation. Do you have copies of everything?" "Multiple copies," I assured her. "And we are taking everything to the police as well." "Good, you should. This looks like criminal fraud to me." She handed me a receipt for the filing. "We will be in touch." The police were next. Marcus and I went to the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department downtown and asked to file a report about fraud and embezzlement. We were directed to the Economic Crimes Unit, where a detective named Sarah Morales took our statement. Detective Morales was probably in her late 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and an expression that suggested she had seen every kind of financial crime imaginable. "HOA fraud," she said, making notes as Marcus walked her through the evidence. "We have been seeing more of these cases lately. People think HOA boards are not subject to the same laws as other organizations, but they are absolutely wrong." "So you will investigate?" I asked. "We will investigate," she confirmed. "This is clearly a significant amount of money, and you have done a lot of the groundwork already. I will need to get subpoenas for bank records, interview the board members, and build a case. But based on what you are showing me, I think we have probable cause for charges. How long will it take?" Marcus asked. Detective Morales shrugged. "Depends on how cooperative everyone is. Financial investigations can take months, but I will make it a priority. The fact that residents are being harmed by the broken elevators, especially elderly and disabled residents, adds an element of urgency." We left the police station feeling like we were finally making progress. But the situation at Grandview Towers was getting worse by the day. Another resident had a medical emergency, a woman on the 16th floor having pregnancy complications. The ambulance crew had to carry her down on a stretcher, and the delay nearly resulted in tragedy. Thankfully, both mother and baby ended up okay, but it was close. A petition started circulating among residents demanding that Sharon and Richard either resign immediately or be forcibly removed. Nearly every resident in the building signed it. Then, 2 weeks after the explosive meeting, the district attorney's office announced they were filing criminal charges. Sharon Whitmore, Richard Kowalski, and Linda Patterson were each charged with multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and misappropriation of funds. Linda had cooperated with investigators after resigning, apparently hoping for a plea deal. Her testimony had provided crucial evidence about how the scheme worked. According to Linda's statement, which was included in the public charging documents, Sharon had been planning the penthouse renovation for over a year. She had approached Richard first, since he handled the building's finances. Together, they had figured out how to move money around to hide what they were doing. They had created the Executive Residential Improvement Project designation to make it sound official, then buried the actual details in paperwork that most residents would never read. When Linda had objected, Sharon had threatened her, saying that Linda would be blamed as the treasurer if anything went wrong. Scared and unsure what to do, Linda had gone along with it, signing off on the transfers and cooking the books to hide the missing money. The day the charges were announced, I was at work when Marcus texted me, "Turn on the news." I pulled up a local news station on my computer. There, on the screen, was footage of Sharon Whitmore being led out of Grandview Towers in handcuffs. Richard Kowalski was arrested separately at his office downtown. Linda Patterson turned herself in with her lawyer. The news anchor was explaining the charges. 3 members of the Grandview Towers HOA board have been arrested following an investigation into the misappropriation of hundreds of thousands of dollars in resident funds. The most serious charge is first-degree felony embezzlement, which carries a potential sentence of up to 25 years in prison. Residents of the luxury high-rise have been without elevator service for nearly 3 months, a situation allegedly caused by the board's diversion of elevator maintenance funds to renovate the personal residence of the HOA president. The camera cut to footage of Mrs. Chen being interviewed in her apartment. "I am 83 years old," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "I have been trapped here for months because they stole our money. They did not care about us at all. They just cared about fancy marble countertops." Watching Sharon's perp walk was satisfying in a way I had not expected. For months, she had lorded over us, dismissing concerns, acting like she was untouchable. Now she was being held accountable, but we still had a building to run and elevators to fix. The special election was held 3 weeks later. With 3 board members having resigned and 2 arrested, we technically did not have a quorum to manage the building anyway. The election was held in the community room again, this time with every resident able to vote by proxy if they could not manage the stairs. Marcus ran for president. I ran for treasurer. Mr. Rodriguez agreed to be vice president, and we filled out the rest of the board with residents who had been active in the investigation and who had clean financial backgrounds that we verified thoroughly. We won in a landslide. Every single one of our candidates was elected with over 90% of the vote. Our first act as the new board was to hire a forensic accountant to conduct a complete audit of the building's finances. The audit took 2 weeks and confirmed what we had suspected. The financial situation was even worse than we thought. The building's reserve fund was depleted, the elevator fund was nearly empty, and there were unpaid bills to contractors and service providers. Our second act was to file a civil lawsuit against Sharon, Richard, and Linda personally, seeking to recover all misappropriated funds plus punitive damages. We also filed insurance claims with the building's liability insurer and with the bonding company that was supposed to protect the HOA against board member malfeasance. The insurance company initially tried to deny the claim, arguing that intentional criminal acts were not covered. But our lawyer, a tough woman named Janet Kowalski who ironically shared a last name with Richard but was no relation, fought back hard. She argued that the HOA had purchased crime insurance specifically to protect against this kind of situation, and that the insurer had a duty to pay. After weeks of negotiation and threats of bad faith litigation, the insurance company agreed to pay $200,000 toward the elevator repairs. The bonding company added another $100,000. That gave us $300,000, plus the $52,000 that was still in the elevator fund. It was not enough. The full repair estimate was $450,000 now, since the delay had caused additional damage to both elevators. We called an emergency meeting of all residents to discuss the shortfall. Marcus presented several options: a special assessment where each resident would have to pay immediately, a loan that would increase monthly HOA fees, or a combination of both. The room was somber as residents absorbed the reality. Even though Sharon and the old board were the ones who had caused this mess, we were all going to pay for it. Mrs. Chen raised her hand. "What happens if they are convicted?" she asked. "If they go to prison, do we get our money back?" Janet Kowalski, who had joined us for the meeting, answered. "Potentially, yes. If they are convicted, the court can order restitution as part of sentencing. That means they would be legally required to pay back what they stole. The problem is that collecting on that judgment can be difficult. We do not know if they have assets that can be seized if they have hidden money or if they will just declare bankruptcy." "What about Sharon's penthouse?" someone asked. "She renovated it with our money. Can we force her to sell it?" "We are pursuing that," Janet said. In the civil lawsuit, We are asking the court to place a lien on her property for the amount of the misappropriated funds. If she sells, we would get paid from the proceeds. We are also asking the court to force a sale if she cannot pay otherwise, but that process takes time, possibly years." "We do not have years," I said. "We need working elevators now." The room was silent for a moment, then Mr. Rodriguez spoke up. "I propose we do a combination approach. Take out a loan for $200,000, paid back over 10 years through a modest increase in HOA fees. And do a special assessment of $600 per unit to cover the rest. That gives us the money we need immediately, and it spreads the pain out." There was grumbling, but people understood the math. After discussion and debate, the residents voted to approve Mr. Rodriguez's plan. The special assessment notices went out the next week. Most residents paid, understanding that it was necessary. A few complained bitterly, but even they eventually came around when we showed them the financial records and explained exactly why we were in this situation. With funding secured, we hired a reputable elevator company to begin repairs. The work started in late November, nearly 4 months after the second elevator had failed. The elevator technicians told us that both elevators were in terrible shape. "This is years of deferred maintenance," the lead technician said, shaking his head as he showed Marcus and me the deteriorated cables and worn components. "Whoever was managing this building was criminally negligent." "Funny you should use that word," I said, and explained about the criminal charges. The technician laughed darkly. "Well, at least someone is being held accountable. I have seen situations like this where board members just resign and walk away and nobody faces consequences." The repair work took 8 weeks. During that time, residents of Grandview Towers continued climbing stairs daily, but the mood in the building had changed. People were talking to each other more, helping elderly neighbors with groceries, organizing carpools for those who needed to leave the building for work or appointments. The crisis had created a sense of community that had not existed before. Mrs. Chen told me one day as I delivered groceries to her apartment, "This has been hard, but I have met more of my neighbors in the past few months than I did in the previous 15 years. People care. That is worth something." The first elevator came back online on January 15th. I happened to be in the lobby when the technician gave the all-clear. Marcus was there too, along with a dozen other residents who had heard the news. We all piled into the elevator together, pressing buttons for different floors. As the car rose smoothly upward, people were laughing and cheering. Mrs. Chen was crying happy tears. When I got off on my floor, I walked to my apartment with a spring in my step that had nothing to do with avoiding the stairs. It was the feeling of justice, of people coming together to solve a problem, of holding wrongdoers accountable. The second elevator was repaired a week later, and Grandview Towers was finally fully functional again. The criminal case against Sharon, Richard, and Linda moved forward through the court system. Linda took a plea deal, agreeing to testify against Sharon and Richard in exchange for reduced charges. She was ultimately sentenced to 2 years probation and ordered to pay $50,000 in restitution. Richard fought the charges initially, but eventually took a plea deal too, when it became clear the evidence against him was overwhelming. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison and ordered to pay $200,000 in restitution. Sharon refused to take a deal. She maintained her innocence, claiming that everything she had done was within her authority as HOA president and that the charges were the result of a vendetta by angry residents. Her trial began in late March. I attended as much as I could, sitting in the courtroom gallery with Marcus, Mrs. Chen, and dozens of other Grandview residents. The prosecution presented our evidence methodically, the financial records showing the improper transfers, testimony from contractors about the penthouse renovation, expert witnesses explaining HOA law and fiduciary duty. Linda Patterson testified about how Sharon had orchestrated the scheme and threatened her into compliance. Richard Kowalski, looking miserable in his prison jumpsuit via video link, corroborated Linda's testimony. Sharon's defense attorney tried to argue that the board had broad discretion in managing funds, and that Sharon had genuinely believed she was acting in the building's best interests by maintaining the penthouse as a showcase unit. It was not a good argument, and the jury clearly did not buy it. After 3 days of testimony and 4 hours of deliberation, the jury came back with guilty verdicts on all counts. 12 counts of fraud, 8 counts of embezzlement, and multiple counts of misappropriation of funds. Sharon's face went white as the verdicts were read. She closed her eyes, swaying slightly in her seat. Her attorney put a steadying hand on her arm. Sentencing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, Sharon was taken into custody, denied bail because the judge considered her a flight risk given the severity of the potential sentence. At the sentencing hearing, the judge allowed victims to make statements. Mrs. Chen went first, wheeling herself to the front of the courtroom. "Your Honor, I am 83 years old," she said, her voice stronger than I had heard it in months. "I worked my entire life, saved my money, and bought my apartment so I would have a safe, comfortable place to live in my old age. Sharon Whitmore took that security from me. She stole money that was supposed to keep my building maintained and safe, and she used it to buy herself luxuries. For months, I was trapped in my apartment, missing doctor appointments, unable to see my grandchildren, completely isolated. I have nightmares about what would have happened if there had been a fire, if I had needed to evacuate. I could not have made it down those stairs. I would have died. Mrs. Chen paused, wiping her eyes. Sharon Whitmore did not care about any of that. She cared about her marble countertops and her fancy bathtub. She is a thief and a liar, and I hope you give her the maximum sentence. Other residents testified too, talking about medical emergencies, missed opportunities, physical pain from climbing stairs daily, and the betrayal of trust that hurt almost as much as the financial loss. When it was Sharon's turn to speak, she stood and faced the judge. She had clearly been coached by her attorney, and her statement was an attempt at contrition. "Your Honor, I made mistakes. I used poor judgment. I should have been more transparent with residents about the renovation project. I thought I was doing what was best for the building, but I see now that I was wrong. I apologize to everyone I hurt, and I hope they can forgive me someday." It was a carefully worded non-apology that took no real responsibility. The judge saw right through it. "Miss Whitmore," the judge said, looking at her over reading glasses, "you were in a position of trust. Residents of Grandview Towers relied on you to manage their money responsibly and to maintain their building safely. Instead, you engaged in a systematic, long-term scheme to steal from them to fund personal luxuries. You showed no remorse until you were caught. Even now, your apology rings hollow because you refuse to take real responsibility for your actions. The harm you caused was significant and affected vulnerable people, including elderly and disabled residents who were effectively trapped in their homes due to your theft. This court takes such breaches of trust very seriously." The judge sentenced Sharon to 18 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 12 years. She also ordered Sharon to pay full restitution of $350,000, plus court costs and penalties. Sharon collapsed into her chair, sobbing. Her attorney requested bail pending appeal, but the judge denied it. Sharon was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, still crying. In the hallway afterward, Mrs. Chen hugged me tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for not letting her get away with it." "We all did this together," I said. "You, Marcus, everyone in the building. We held her accountable." The civil lawsuit against Sharon, Richard, and Linda continued separately from the criminal case. With the criminal convictions now on record, our civil case became much stronger. The defendants' attorneys approached us about settling. After negotiation, we reached an agreement. Sharon would transfer ownership of her penthouse to the HOA in lieu of payment. The HOA could then sell it and use the proceeds to repay the special assessment to residents and rebuild the reserve fund. Richard agreed to pay $50,000 from his retirement accounts. Linda had already paid her $50,000 as part of her plea deal. The penthouse sold for $700,000, a premium price due to all the high-end renovations Sharon had installed with our money. After real estate commissions and fees, the HOA netted about $650,000. We used that money to refund the special assessment to residents, to pay down the elevator repair loan, and to rebuild the reserve fund. In the end, most residents got back about 80% of what they had paid in the special assessment. It was not perfect, but it was far better than we had hoped for initially. Life at Grandview Towers slowly returned to normal, or at least a new version of normal. The elevators worked perfectly. The new board ran things transparently, publishing detailed financial reports monthly and holding open meetings where residents could ask questions about anything. Marcus proved to be an excellent HOA president, bringing the same meticulous attention to detail that he applied to software development. I learned more about accounting than I ever wanted to know in my role as treasurer, but I found it oddly satisfying to manage the finances correctly and to know that every dollar was being spent appropriately. Mr. Rodriguez oversaw building maintenance, bringing his contractor expertise to ensure we were getting quality work at fair prices. The other board members were equally dedicated. We implemented new policies to prevent future abuse. Mandatory rotation of board positions every 2 years, required background checks for all board members, quarterly audits by an independent accountant, and a requirement that any expenditure over $5,000 be approved by a vote of all residents, not just the board. Most importantly, we changed the culture. The HOA was no longer a small group of people making decisions behind closed doors. It was a transparent organization that served the residents and was accountable to them. Mrs. Chen thrived with the working elevators. She was able to attend her doctor appointments regularly, to go to lunch with her friends, to visit her grandchildren. She told me once that being mobile again had added years to her life. The woman whose husband had the heart attack on the stairs sent the entire board a thank you note, along with homemade cookies. "You saved lives by fixing those elevators," she wrote, "and you restored faith that people can work together to make things right." On a warm evening in late May, nearly a year after the elevators first failed, the residents of Grandview Towers held a community barbecue on the building's rooftop terrace. The space had been neglected for years under Sharon's management, but our new board had cleaned it up and turned it into a beautiful gathering place with grills, picnic tables, and strings of lights. I stood at the edge of the terrace, looking out over Charlotte's skyline as the sun set. Marcus came up beside me holding a beer. "Pretty good view," he said. "Not bad," I agreed. "Though I am not sure it is worth what Sharon paid for her penthouse view." Marcus laughed. "You know what the best part of all this is?" "What?" "We did it. A bunch of regular people, not lawyers or politicians or professional activists. Just residents who decided they were not going to let someone steal from them and get away with it. We investigated, we organized, we held people accountable, and we fixed things." "We did do that," I said, clinking my beer bottle against his. "Though I would have preferred not to climb 12 flights of stairs every day for 4 months. "Fair point." Marcus took a sip of his beer, "but I think it was worth it. Look around." I looked at the rooftop terrace, filled with dozens of residents laughing, eating, and talking. Mrs. Chen was playing cards with a group of friends. Young families were chasing their kids around. Neighbors who had never spoken before were getting to know each other. "This never would have happened under Sharon," Marcus said. "She would have kept this space locked up or restricted access or charged extra fees to use it. She saw the building as her personal fiefdom. We turned it back into a community." He was right. The trauma of the elevator crisis and the fight for justice had transformed Grandview Towers from a building where people happened to live in proximity to a real community where people looked out for each other. "To holding people accountable," I said, raising my beer. To holding people accountable, Marcus echoed. We stood there as the sun sank below the horizon, bathing the city in gold and orange light. Somewhere in a prison across the state, Sharon Whitmore was beginning a very long sentence. The elevators in Grandview Towers hummed smoothly, carrying residents up and down 28 floors just as they were supposed to. And in the rooftop terrace, a community that had been tested and strengthened celebrated together. It had been a long road from discovering the truth about the stolen elevator fund to standing here now, justice served and systems fixed. But we had walked that road together, and that made all the difference. Later that night, as I rode the elevator down to my floor, I thought about everything that had happened. The initial discovery, the investigation, the confrontations, the arrests, the trial, the repairs, the restitution. It had consumed nearly a year of my life, countless hours of work, and more stress than I cared to remember, but it had been worth it. Not just because we got the elevators fixed, though that was important. Not just because Sharon and the others went to prison, though they deserved it. It was worth it because we had proven something important. That ordinary people have the power to stand up to corruption and win. That justice is possible when people refuse to be passive victims, and that communities can come together to solve even serious problems. The elevator doors opened on my floor. I stepped out into the hallway, the same hallway I had walked through hundreds of times before. But somehow it felt different now. It felt like home in a way it had not before, part of a building that belonged to its residents, not to whoever happened to control the HOA board. I unlocked my apartment door and stepped inside, already looking forward to the next board meeting where we would discuss the new proposals for the building's community garden. It was not as dramatic as uncovering embezzlement and sending people to prison, but it was the work of building and maintaining a healthy community. And that, I realized, was the real victory. Not just stopping the bad actors, but creating something better in their place. Not just punishing the guilty, but protecting the innocent. Not just recovering the stolen money, but ensuring it could never happen again. As I settled onto my couch and pulled up the latest financials on my laptop, reviewing them carefully as I did every week now, I smiled. Sharon Whitmore had thought she could steal from us, that residents would never notice or would not care enough to fight back. She had been spectacularly wrong. And every resident of Grandview Towers was better off because we had proven her wrong, because we had refused to accept corruption, because we had done the hard work of holding her accountable. The elevators worked. The finances were transparent. The community was strong. Justice had been served. In the end, that was all anyone could ask for.